I don't know. Okay, so I am here at the Las Vegas courthouse with Todd Engel. Sentencing went on today. It took a long time, a lot longer than we were thinking, and there's a lot to talk about today. It's so frustrating coming out here to bring this to you. I'm going to wait till I can see people and make sure that you can hear me. Is everybody hearing me okay? Just so I don't have to go back and restart. I also want to put out there, nobody is allowed to make money off of my live stream. I don't want to see it streamed out somewhere else that people are making money off of it. I do this for free. I do this to get the truth out.
I might have fell for that.
So, can you hear me? I see that we've got people in here. Can you hear me? I know we got a little bit of... Okay, we can hear me great. All right, so Todd's sentencing. First off, the courtroom was packed. Absolutely packed. There were BLM in the room. There was FBI. There was Secret Service, I believe. And then the supporters obviously took up both sides. We go right into the sentencing, and Daniel Sheese and Stephen Myrie are inside the room. I think everyone else was in there, but in different areas, so they were just basically at the table. Todd and his lawyer at the other side. And they're talking about the PSR and the count 12 obstruction of justice and count 16 interstate travel and aid of extortion. Hey guys, can you take your conversation just a little bit further away? Thank you. So we go to the pre-sentencing report, and they have some arguing. The base level is 18. They have a +2 for level of threat of death, so that terrorism enhancement. They talk about the restitution. They are talking about a $1.5 million restitution to be split by the people that took plea deals, he says, to be split by the people who took plea deals. And that itself brings up +4 levels. A firearm was present and shown. That also brings a +6 levels. An officer of the law during an event, and he willfully obstructed that officer. That's how they're justifying that. So it comes to a level 37. With his criminal history, which he had a reckless driving in 2011, and in 1985, when he was 17 years old, he had a felony burglary, I guess. And they said with his criminal history being, they labeled it a 1, and I'm not really sure exactly what that means. I don't know how they can bring up charges when you're 17, especially charges like that, which I believe it said he was released to his parents of his own recognizance, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. So the initial guide, they had 210 months to 262 months. They were also saying served concurrently, so the count 12 hold up to 120 months, count 16 up to 210 months maximum. And they decided they were going to serve those concurrently. Supervised release for 3 years by caregivers. The full 3 years supervised release is what they were suggesting. Something about 5 years of probation not required. So then the government, Dan Sheese, goes in and he agrees with the probation's guidelines. The victim-related adjustment for the victims, he agrees with that. He says 37 gives him 210 to 262 months plus the terrorism enhancement. Now he goes back and forth. He says we could do the terrorism enhancement, but it doesn't really matter because with the 2 counts together, even with the terrorism enhancement, it still goes from 210 months to 262 months. So they argue that for a while. The judge is like, well, what do you mean? You don't want us to do the terrorism enhancement? He says, yes, I do, but it doesn't matter if you do or not because it goes into the same guidelines as the 37 points. The reason for the recommendation is supported by the jury's verdict. The jury for obstruction of justice and for interstate travel and aid of extortion. He keeps bringing this up. He keeps bringing up the fact that he was convicted by a jury, that his conduct merited that conduct. Under forfeiture principles as the rule of law applies. We are a nation of laws, not a nation of men. This is Dan Sheese. You know, I find it really interesting that the government here is saying that they're a nation of laws when they are the one that broke the law and hid evidence from these men at this trial. In Gloria Navarro's own motion or response to a motion, she states that the evidence that they withheld went right to the self-defense and defense of others defense that these men tried to get on here. So right here, Dan Sheese is standing up in the room now. Dan Sheese wasn't part of our trial, so he has no idea. He stands up and he says, "We are a nation of laws. Well, start acting like it." It was dealt with in the courtroom about all of his charges and that they can't say that. If Cliven is upset with the court's verdict and he calls for people, that is lawlessness. Our nation and the court give special protection to police officers and officers of the law. Yeah, they give special protections to police officers and officers of the law by allowing them to hide evidence and allowing them to get away with things like of this nature. So I really just don't understand where all of this is going. We solve our disputes in the courtroom and we give our police special protection. This is an exact quote from Daniel Sheese. Todd was the aggressor, and he acted in a course to intimidate federal government. His intent was to go up to Nevada, and then he starts quoting his Facebook. To go to Nevada, to go up against the feds. He is oiling his bolt and loading his mag. He is going to blow through the barricades and light them on fire. So here we have, once again, someone who is literally being charged and found guilty based on what they said on their Facebook and not their actions on that day. Cliven's speech, and this is still Dan Sheese, Cliven's speech, he told the people to go get his cattle. Leaving to shut down the federal by force of arms. Going to walk the freeway. We're back to reading off Todd's different Facebook posts. Going to walk the freeway and take the cattle back by force. His actions with others created an extremely volatile and dangerous situation. Also, the actions of the BLM and the FBI created that volatile situation well before the protesters were even there. Todd was there in part to create another Ruby Ridge. They're also talking about his Facebook. After the BLM lost and backed down due to overwhelming force of the people and their arms. This is another quote from Todd Engel. The BLM will release their cattle or there will be problems. And if not, it's to continue. He didn't tell everyone to engage, everyone the Bundy information was not correct on Facebook afterwards. Daniel Sheese says, Todd didn't go out and say, well, we found some of this information to be incorrect. What exact information did they find to be incorrect? That there wasn't snipers? Because I believe in the Wooten memo and everything that has come out, they found that information to be correct. So what exactly, they're saying that he didn't go out and lie to the people and tell them that what he experienced wasn't true, so therefore he is going to serve more time. He went to his sheriff afterwards and told him of his actions and that he was ready to wage a war with the federal government and that the sheriff should stay out of it. I never heard anything about that in the trial. Here they're bringing up stuff that I don't know where they have it, but it never came out in the trial, and I was there every single day for both trials, and none of that came out. He went to Sugar Pine Mine. Again, they bring up Sugar Pine Mine, a completely lawful action, and then he talks about him going to Malheur. He discusses, again, the video where he talks about the arrest of Andrea Parker. They need to sentence to promote further respect for the law and law enforcement. So what here Daniel Sheese is saying, we need to make a point, make him an example for everyone else that if you go up against the federal government, unjust or just, that they will put you in jail and lock you away. In this country, this is a society where we resolve our disputes peacefully and we respect the law. Go by your own words, Stephen Myrie and Dennis Sheese or Daniel Sheese. You say you're all lawful, but you purposely kept this information out so that that man would go to prison. Obviously, Todd still blames the federal government of where he is today. There is no casualty. There were no casualties and no shots fired, no injuries. Well, he says, well, the feds and the BLM and the police were hurt by this experience. Then he starts talking about DeLemus. He received an 87-month sentence, and Greg Burleson received 68-year sentence. He says his actions, Todd Engel's actions, were not like DeLemus's actions, but much more like Greg Burleson's, and that it wasn't as bad as Greg Burleson, but he should be sentenced closer to Greg Burleson's sentencing. He made threats against the law enforcement. Victims deserve to have their justice, and it is an important part of the judicial system. That is correct. Many of these victims want justice. They want justice, Gloria Navarro. We want justice for the government withholding evidence. I heard that there were motions, like, no, we haven't heard about this Wooten motion. There is a rumor going around that the Wooten motion was ruled on this morning. It should be on the docket if somebody has the docket. Unfortunately, I heard that it was a no, but we don't know. So if anyone can get on the docket and check that out, I'd love to see it. The people deserve their justice. So then we go to Todd and Markovich. He asked them to strike the word sniper. They're trying to put Todd as a sniper because he knelt behind the barrier, and they're trying to put him as a sniper. Because someone who hides or conceals themselves with a gun, they don't need to point that gun at anyone. They are a sniper. The judge argues with Steese, and they go ahead and take that wordage out of the PSR. He's also saying that a friend was the one that posted the comments on Facebook, not Engel himself. Engel says, you know, he was driving. His friend was in the truck posting those comments, and they were not his own comments. They were also talking about how the fact that they brought in statements that weren't even in the courtroom. By stating he believes the government was acting unlawfully and unconstitutionally, it goes to show that he believes in the law. Let's see. Then they talk about the restitution, the $1.5 million. And I really have to say, you know, Warren did a great job. He said, determining the amount for restitution of $1.5 million to be split by all defendants. It is a conclusion statement, a one-page statement written by someone who did not do the investigation themselves. Here we have, again, they're going to do an investigation, pass it off to someone else to write their word on it so that they can continue to get away with these things. This is the bias for the two other sentencings, they say. And the judge says, well, those sentencings, Greg Burleson and Jerry DeLemus, they did not attest to it. So he's the first person to attest to it. So they decide that they're going to take that outside, and they're going to come back in September and argue the amount of restitution. They contest highly to the restitution. Here we go back into Warren. We are a nation of laws and rules, but we are also a nation of rebels. We are a nation of people who stand in protest against unjustness. And that's the very core of our foundings. The people to rise so that the government knows who they work for. Thank you. And Todd is respectful of the law. And he goes to protest because he believes in our country, and he believes that we the people the government does work for we the people. They talk about compounding the two is an issue of a +2 enhancement is unfair because it's a double counting. They argue that back and forth with the probation, and they decide they're going to keep that. Then they argue that, well, Tier 3 is the least culpable because you said that yourself and you allowed them to go first. So how about you give him a -4 for having a minimal part in the event? There was a lot of argument about whether his part was minimal or not. His part in the obstruction, his part in the interstate aid and travel and aid, you know, Todd's side argues he wasn't in command of anyone. He had a gun, he never pointed at anyone. He wasn't in any involved in any special information that nobody else had. He wasn't part of the conspiracy. He wasn't found guilty of part of the conspiracy. So he should get that minor. The government says, oh, well, when we said you were least culpable, that was before anyone had any evidence. Well, the government had the evidence all along. In fact, they hid the good evidence. So they're saying, no, he's very culpable. Of the people that were found guilty and took plea deals, he's extremely culpable. Then Warren says, you're saying that the mere possession of a firearm at a protest is a criminal offense, because they keep bringing all this stuff up. They keep, talking about all these other charges that he wasn't charged with in his PSR. And it goes against the jury's verdict, that Daniel Shees says. And then Daniel Shees brings up that it's an AR-15. At that point, Warren says, so now black guns are, and the judge cuts him off and says, you guys aren't supposed to talk to each other. You're supposed to talk to me. We're not going to get into arguments. And it was pretty much getting into an argument up there. Probation said he was doing what he wanted to, and I didn't believe it was a small part in the case. He also brought up the fact that he also did the other people that took plea deals, and that he didn't feel that any of them had a lesser part in there, and he was kind of stumbling around like, I can't even believe they're asking this. Yeah, because of the other defendants who plead didn't get a downsize, he didn't see in giving it here. His role in the instruction was not minimal. It brings up the Facebook again, but not his actual actions. He had a significant role in the charges he was charged with. So what he is telling us is that regardless of what you do on the day, you are guilty of something. He was in the wash interacting with, he wasn't in the wash interacting with the BLM or the FBI. He was on the bridge interacting with Nevada Highway Patrol, and there are photos that show this. This is back to Warren. The judge finds that it does not apply for a downward adjustment. Then Warren goes back. He feels that they were divided into groups. It doesn't apply here. He talks about the 1.5 million loss, and that is not the loss. The government went against a $1 million fee they were supposed to, that was their loss. This $1.5 million that they spent to recover that loss is not the actual loss, and they are actually charging the defendants with more than the actual losses themselves. There was a lot of argument back and forth about this. I believe one of my favorite quotes of the day, let's see. They're talking about the fact this 1.5 million is the employees. It doesn't include. So this 1.5 million that they're talking doesn't include the vehicles, doesn't include the meals, doesn't include the hotel rooms, doesn't include the overtime. So it could be 2.5, 3.5 million. He said, I hate to say it, but if a cattleman ran his ranch like this, he would be out of business. Spending 2.5 to 3.5 million to recover a $1 million loss in fees. Then they argue that it wasn't about recovering the fees, it was about getting the cattle off the land, which is what we knew all along. If it was about the fees, what would happen in a normal situation? They would put a lien on those cattle, and every time he sold one of those cattle, it would go right to the fees. That's how it should have been dealt with, but they could never actually do it the right way. So yes, it's absolutely ridiculous. He's arguing that it's a communicational loss, a coincidental loss, and that it shouldn't happen. So then Warren goes into his speech about victims and mercy. He says in 1940 during World War, in the honor in the battlefield, and that our men honor doesn't mean throwing away the key and locking them up forever. And that him getting out when he was 70 years old, it would be ridiculous, because what kind of what are you trying to get from Todd here? When he comes out and he's 70, do you think his attitude's going to be any different? This is a big thing in America. We're looking to put people away. We're not looking to rehabilitate anyone. In fact, our system actually is a swinging door. So you put them away for so many years, they're set up to come right back. That's because people are making money off of people in prison. So the crime, the punishment doesn't fit the crime. Then Todd gets up. This was the hardest part of the day. Todd gets up and starts arguing the PSR with the judge, and she doesn't want to hear it. And she says, your lawyer, you know, she stops him and says, your lawyer, and he's going through all these points, and she says, your lawyer's the one that's supposed to argue this. And he did a good job. And you don't quite understand what's going on here. And Todd continues arguing with her. And you could see on the stand that she just really went the other direction here. He argued with her. He said things like, you know, he's being charged in the PSR with basically extortion, not interstate travel and native extortion. He's being charged with things that he was not found guilty of. At this point, the judge brings up, and think about all of this, people. So he was found guilty of 2 counts. And they kind of coerced him into saying, okay, well, you're going to accept these 2 counts, and then they'll drop the rest of the charges if you don't go back against these 2 counts. And so they did that. And what ended up happening today is just because they dropped those counts doesn't mean they can't add that information into your PSR report and add it to your sentence. She said, you weren't convicted, but you weren't acquitted. Some people thought you did, some people didn't. So therefore, we're adding to your sentence because of things that you were not convicted to. That's really scary to me. That's really scary. If I would have known that back then, I would have said, Todd, continue on with your charges and join us in the next trial. And we all know how that would have ended up. Posting stuff on Facebook. Todd continues to argue points, and then he says, you know what? I didn't post a lot of that stuff on my Facebook, but I'm not going to make excuses for it. I am going to take responsibility for it. He's all, today I am being charged with posting stuff on Facebook and not with my actions on that day, because I did not assault or intimidate anyone. If my Facebook post didn't exist, I would not be here today. No good deed goes unpunished, he says. If you send me away, I won't be there for my mother's funeral. They go back and forth about the posting on Facebook. And he said, I posted stuff on Facebook and it's going to put me in prison. Remember everyone out there today. Remember when you're out there spouting out and you're upset about something, don't put it on Facebook. Go out, scream to the hills, kick something, you know, get frustrated, but don't do it on Facebook, because if you do it on Facebook, you're going to end up in a courtroom and you're going to end up in a jail cell, because we don't have our First Amendment any longer. She actually brings up the Legos incident again. There's a picture of Legos of somebody's family, somebody's child that did this Lego outline of the bridge, which is really interesting to me, because you don't see the person that did this. You don't know the age of the person that did this. How could they know? Whose side was who? Whose side was who? You know, who are they upset about? We don't know any of this information.
The people in the wash were the good guys. It was Star Wars.
Exactly. The people in the wash were the good guys. It was Star Wars guys. So which side is the good side? It was just a picture of bridges and Legos. So then we come down to the end of it. She said she is not a therapist and believes he needs a therapist. You are still in denial of your actions here, and she's going to put the hammer down. She sentences him to 168 months in prison. That is 14 years, people. 14 years in prison. He also waives the restitution until that's decided at the later date. They also said to be split between a bunch of people, which I don't recall a lot of restitution talk in Greg Burleson or Jerry DeLoomis. So I'm really sidelined by all this Restitution Act. I think they waived it then in those, but I'm not for sure. I've gotten so far out that it's really frustrating to me. I feel that Todd was standing on principle today when he was talking to the judge, and it didn't do him any favors. And when he walked out of the courtroom, he said, freedom isn't free, and this isn't over. I feel, we saw this happen with Jake Ryan in Oregon. I feel like the judge was going to give Jake Ryan a much lesser sentence, and they were ready to do that, but when he got up and he spoke, it actually hurt his case. And I feel that today, I hope that was what was going to happen today. And when Todd got up and started talking and kind of going in circles, he was saying some really wonderful things, and then he would add but and come full circle, because he does feel that he's sitting there in jail. He's serving the sentence for something that he shouldn't be. You know, the main players in this are all free, and he's got caught in obstruction of justice and interstate travel in aid of extortion. And she used that against him today. And my heart goes out with the family. Warren's going to continue on. They did say they are going to appeal immediately. He's been asked to be kept near Warren so that he can continue fighting this. This fight is not over. The money that was raised for the Wooten memo is going to continue to fight for the Wooten memo and for Todd Engel's appeal to the 9th. I don't know. I know that she brought Greg Burleson back into her courtroom. She ruled on that. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. I heard that she did rule this morning. Once again, this is rumors. That she did rule this morning that they're not going to get a new trial. And there were some other things that she ruled this morning, but I haven't been able to check the docket and see what exactly is going on here. So now what we're looking at is this could go really bad for the rest of these people. I mean, you know, Eric, he's already served double the amount of time that they could possibly give him, but they don't necessarily have to give him time served. And he could go back to jail for a year, and same with Scott Drexler. And what this really shows is they're going to make an example of these men because they were standing for the rule of law, and the other side was against the rule of law, but that doesn't matter. Just like Lavoy Finicum, you know, he was going to meet with the sheriff, so they decided to stop him beforehand. They are having a court case currently because one of the officers lied about shooting his weapon, lied about shooting one of the first shots that were shot at the truck. And they're gonna take him to court for lying, but they don't say that shooting him was unlawful. So where in the world does one stop and the other begin? You know, we're going to hold people accountable, but we're only going to hold certain people accountable. So, I agree. You do give police special protections against the law. And it's very frustrating. And we the people, the government does work for we the people. And when people start waking up and figuring that out, that's what's going to happen. I hope to see every single one of these people that have walked free sue the federal government, sue Stephen Myrie and the prosecution, sue the FBI and the BLM for all the wrongdoing that they did here. If those jury members had seen the evidence, Todd Engel would not have been convicted. And I agree with him, and I am very sorry that today went the way it did, and I do truly believe that Gloria wanted to give him a much easier sentence, and it just went bad in the courtroom. And you know, I don't know what's better, to stand on principle and go to prison forever, or to lie about what you did and get out, or, you know, I'm not sure, or it's just so frustrating to have this happen.
See you later, guys.
So
Where's Eric?
I guess we'll come back later if I get information on what motions were ruled on and what exactly happened, but that's all I have right now. Thanks.
All right.